We're following breaking news out of Georgia where FBI agents are executing a search warrant at the Fulton County election office.
We are tracking the results of a crackdown on cartels and the impact on St. Louis.
The DEA says the organizations are responsible for more than 100,000 deaths in the United States every year, raking in billions of dollars.
The U.S. Marshals Service tells us that 26 of those children were rescued and the other 13, they were located.
At 11:47 p.m. Eastern Time, FBI Director Christopher Wray stood before cameras and delivered 4 words that sent shockwaves across federal law enforcement. We found the children. Behind him, a digital evidence board displayed 207 photographs. 207 children who, according to state records, had been enrolled in a Minneapolis nonprofit daycare network for 4 years. 207 kids who had never existed. Until 3 weeks ago, when border agents in Arizona found 19 of them locked inside a semi-trailer headed south. They were real, they were alive, and they had been reported as ghosts. This is how the FBI, ICE, and DHS dismantled what federal prosecutors are calling the largest charity fraud and human trafficking operation ever discovered on American soil. If you think you understand how deep corruption can go, you are about to be proven wrong. 4:17 a.m. Central Time. Minnesota. Temperature -8 degrees. Fog rolls thick across empty streets of Cedar Riverside. No pedestrians, no traffic, just industrial heating units and a distant snowplow. But beneath that silence, over 90 federal agents are moving into position. FBI Hostage Rescue Team, ICE Enforcement and Removal Operations, DHS Investigative Units, DEA Tactical Squads, SWAT teams from 3 jurisdictions. Black body armor, infrared helmets, suppressed rifles, ballistic shields stamped with one word: federal. The target is a 4-story brick building on 24th Avenue and Riverside. The sign reads, Bright Futures Children's Foundation. Operating for 6 years. Claimed to serve over 800 children daily across 12 facilities. Has received $43 million in federal childcare subsidies since 2019. And, according to encrypted records seized 2 weeks earlier during a raid on a Somali logistics company in Eden Prairie, not a single child has ever walked through those doors. At 4:21 a.m., the breach begins. Flashbangs detonate. Glass shatters under the ram. Agents flood inside in columns, infrared lasers cutting through smoke like red threads. Federal agents, get on the ground! Voices echo through hallways smelling of paint and chemicals. First floor, empty. Desks in neat rows, colorful posters, plastic bins with fake names, cubbies never touched. It looks perfect, exactly like a daycare. Except there are no toys, no crayon marks, no dirt, no wear. It is a stage set. Second floor, agents find the operations hub. 8 computer terminals, 4 industrial printers, stacks of blank birth certificates, boxes of forged social security cards, a steel cabinet with 2,300 fabricated enrollment forms, each tied to a child identity that never existed, but had been billed to Minnesota for 4 years of care. The fraud generates $67,000 per week. But in the basement, agents find something that turns a financial crime into a federal nightmare. A soundproofed room, 12 sleeping mats on the concrete floor, chains bolted into the foundation, a medical kit with sedatives, and a whiteboard on the wall covered in routes, dates, and grid coordinates that match known cartel smuggling corridors through Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico. One agent, a 15-year veteran of the FBI's Crimes Against Children unit, stands in that room for 4 minutes without speaking. Then he radios up to command. We need forensics down here, and we need to assume this was not just fraud. This was a pipeline. By 6:50 a.m., the CEO is in federal custody. Hassan Dahir, 42, naturalized citizen from Mogadishu, no prior arrests, owns 3 properties worth $2.1 million, drives a Mercedes G-Wagon. His wife wears custom jewelry from a Dubai boutique that only accepts cash or crypto. When agents search his Edina home office, they find an encrypted laptop. Inside, cyber teams discover a master ledger mapping a network so vast it takes 72 hours just to visualize. The operation? The Goodwill Network. Not just one charity, 47 nonprofits across Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, South Dakota. Daycare centers, after-school programs, youth mentorship, refugee assistance, food banks, all registered, all with legitimate sounding boards. all receiving state and federal grants, and all shells. Children do not exist, staff fabricated, locations empty, or shared offices where low-wage receptionists have no idea what happens upstairs. Fraud infrastructure so boring, so bureaucratic, so normal that no auditor digs deep. A money laundering engine that funneled $219 million through fake childcare claims in 5 years. But here is where it gets darker. Investigators cross-reference financial transaction logs with ICE border interdiction data from the Southern Corridor, and they find matches. Payments from Goodwill Network accounts sent to logistics companies in Texas, wire transfers to freight brokers in Arizona, cash deposits into the accounts of truck fleet managers in New Mexico, and those same truck companies show up on ICE watch lists as suspected migrant smuggling contractors tied to cartel-operated human trafficking routes. In other words, the fake charity money was not just being stolen, it was being used to fund the infrastructure that moved real children across the border and into exploitation networks across the Midwest. Some were sold into labor, some disappeared into adoption fraud rings, some were trafficked for purposes federal agents will not even speak about on the record. One forensic accountant with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit described it this way: "They invented kids to steal money from the government. Then they used that money to buy real kids from the cartels. It is the most evil, closed-loop system I have ever seen." If you are still watching this, you need to understand something. This is not an isolated case. This is a blueprint. And if you want more people to see how this system actually works, hit that like button right now so the algorithm does not bury this story. At 7 a.m. the following morning, a joint federal task force convenes inside a secure operations center at the FBI field office in Brooklyn Center, Minnesota. The room is filled with representatives from 12 agencies: FBI, DEA, ICDHS, Criminal Investigation, the U.S. Marshals Service, Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, Hennepin County Sheriff's Office, and 2 officials from the Department of Health and Human Services Office of Inspector General. On the main screen, a digital map of the upper Midwest glows with red markers, 47 of them. Each one represents a location tied to the Goodwill Network. Each one is about to be hit. The operation is called Stolen Futures. The authorization comes directly from the Deputy Attorney General. The rules of engagement are clear. Every facility gets raided simultaneously. No warnings, no leaks, no chance for evidence to be destroyed or suspects to run. At exactly 9:13 a.m., over 1,100 federal agents, supported by SWAT teams, K-9 units, digital forensics techs, and financial crimes investigators, launch coordinated strikes across 4 states. In Minneapolis, agents hit 6 facilities within 14 minutes. In St. Paul, they breach 4 more. In Rochester, Duluth, Bloomington, and Mankato, tactical units move through office parks and industrial zones, pulling hard drives, seizing file cabinets, and detaining employees who thought they were working for legitimate nonprofits. In Milwaukee, agents raid a warehouse that was listed as a youth recreation facility. Inside, they find industrial scales, vacuum seal machines, shrink-wrapped bundles of U.S. currency totaling $4.7 million, and ledgers that show cash deposits corresponding with arrival times of trucks coming north from the Texas border. By noon, the seizures are staggering. $19 million in cash, 41 vehicles, including luxury SUVs, cargo vans, and 2 refrigerated trucks used for long-distance transport, 673 falsified childcare licenses, over 12,000 fabricated child identity records, 82 firearms, including 3 fully automatic rifles, and 104 encrypted phones that investigators are now working around the clock to crack. But more importantly, they arrest 32 individuals: business managers, accountants, operational coordinators, drivers, and 3 men identified by ICE as known cartel-affiliated human smugglers with direct ties to trafficking networks operated by a faction of the Sinaloa cartel, specializing in family separation and child exploitation routes. One of those men, during interrogation, tells federal agents something chilling. "You think this is about stealing money from daycares? You have no idea what you just walked into. There are people in your government who made this possible. People with badges, people with titles, people you will never touch." He is half right. Over the next 72 hours, forensic analysts tear through the encrypted servers seized during the raids, and what they find rewrites the entire narrative. The Goodwill Network was not operating in secret. It was operating in plain sight, with assistance from inside the system. Internal emails recovered from Hassan Dahir's devices show direct communication with a senior licensing coordinator at the Minnesota Department of Human Services. This individual, a fictional character named Monica Aldridge, a compliance officer with 11 years of state employment, had been receiving monthly payments of $15,000 in cryptocurrency since 2021. In exchange, she fast-tracked license approvals for Goodwill Network facilities, suppressed audit flags, and altered inspection reports to remove red flags that should have triggered investigations. When federal agents arrest her at her home in Maple Grove, they find $1.3 million in a hidden safe and travel records showing trips to the Cayman Islands, Dubai, and Cancun, all paid for in cash. But she is not alone. Investigators discover that a county child protection supervisor, a fictional character named Gerald Hastings, had been on the payroll for nearly 2 years. His job was simple. Whenever a social worker or case manager raised concerns about children in the Goodwill system, he buried the reports. He reassigned cases. He closed investigations before they could gain traction. He made sure that the ghost children stayed ghosts. And in return, he received a new pickup truck, a boat, and deposits into offshore accounts that totaled just over $890,000. This is not corruption. This is collusion at command level. This is what happens when people inside the system decide the system belongs to them. One FBI agent working the case later said this: "We did not just arrest criminals. We arrested the people who were supposed to stop them." Meanwhile, border agents in Arizona begin tracing the southbound routes. Using GPS data pulled from phones seized in the Minneapolis raids, they identify a human smuggling corridor that runs from Minneapolis through Iowa, Kansas, and Oklahoma, then splits into 2 branches. One heads toward El Paso, the other toward Nogales. ICE investigators coordinate with Mexican federal authorities and map out a network of cartel-controlled stash houses, transit points, and staging facilities on both sides of the border. What they discover is that the Goodwill Network was not just stealing money to fund trafficking. It was part of a larger operational alliance with the Sinaloa cartel's Family Separation Unit, which specializes in taking children from migrant families at the border, holding them for ransom, and if the families cannot pay, selling them into labor, adoption fraud, or worse. At a detention facility in McAllen, Texas, ICE agents interview 7 children recovered during a separate raid 2 weeks earlier. All of them describe being held in a building in Minneapolis with other kids. All of them describe a man who spoke Somali and English. All of them describe being told they would be going to school in America. Instead, they were put on trucks in the middle of the night and driven south. Federal investigators now believe that at least 63 children passed through the Goodwill Network's Minneapolis hub between 2022 and 2024. Some have been recovered. Some are still missing. And some may never be found. This is the cost, not in dollars, in lives, in stolen childhoods, in families that will never be whole again. On February 6, 2025, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Minnesota announces a 63-count federal indictment against Hassan Dahir and 17 co-conspirators. The charges include wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit money laundering, human trafficking, child exploitation, racketeering, and conspiracy to defraud the United States. If convicted on all counts, Dahir faces a maximum sentence of 480 years in federal prison. The Department of Justice also announces the largest civil asset forfeiture action in Minnesota history, targeting properties, vehicles, and financial accounts tied to the network with a total estimated value of $31 million. Those funds, prosecutors say, will be redirected to victim services and child protection programs. But the political fallout is only beginning. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz orders an emergency audit of the state's childcare subsidy program. The Minnesota legislature announces hearings into how the fraud went undetected for so long. Advocacy groups are demanding resignations, federal oversight, independent investigations, and one question keeps surfacing in editorial after editorial. If this was happening in plain sight for years, what else are we not seeing? Power does not always announce itself with violence. Sometimes it moves quietly, dressed in paperwork and nonprofit letterhead. Sometimes it hides behind the language of compassion and the appearance of care. And sometimes The most dangerous criminals are the ones we never think to investigate, because they look exactly like the helpers we trust. This story is a warning. It is a reminder that organized crime does not just operate in the shadows. It infiltrates the systems we depend on. It compromises the people we empower to protect the vulnerable. And it exploits the bureaucracy we assume will catch the fraud. But bureaucracy only works if the people running it are honest. And in this case, they were not. If this story made you realize how deep infiltration can go, drop a comment with one word: exposed. Let people know this is not conspiracy theory. This is documented federal case evidence. And if you think your state is immune to this, you are exactly the kind of person the next network is counting on. This has been a fictional dramatization inspired by real fraud patterns, trafficking cases, and federal enforcement actions. But the systems it describes, the tactics it outlines, and the corruption it exposes are very real. Stay aware, stay loud, and do not let stories like this disappear into silence.